All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Lifelong Learning. I don't know what number this is, but it's one of them. We have got my good friend Jack Roth.
What up, everyone?
Yep,
Good to be here.
and we're going to be talking about a topic that has befallen many content creators, big and small, popular and unpopular, spectacular and awful, beautiful and ugly. The dreaded two words that haunt every man and woman in his dreams or her dreams: writer's block. So before we dive into this, I think what might be helpful is defining writer's block, right? So how would you approach the topic of writer's block?
Yeah. So I would say writer's block is sort of that time where you sit down, you have your paper and pen, you get ready to write, and nothing's coming out.
Yeah.
And you might set an intention for your writing, but you just don't have the words.
They're like, for a lot of the people who write out there, and I think artists, like certain like visual artists, experience a similar thing. Like, for people who put their words out there or who paint or just create art, oftentimes it almost feels like you're encaptured, or what's it called? That's not the right word. You're like possessed by the muse, right? You just feel everything coming out. And it feels great when you're doing that, when you're in that flow state. But when it's not there, you feel like shit.
Yeah.
So, now that we've kind of defined writer's block as this thing, which is it's this phenomenon when the words aren't coming onto the page, how would you like to approach it, and maybe how do you resolve it?
So,
Or rather, let's start, how do you perceive it? How do you look at it?
I would say this question you'd probably have a lot more to talk about because you've been writing for a lot more and you actually write to hosts and with, I would say, some level of pressure.
Yeah.
Where with my writing, it purely has no stakes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not really thinking about writing for an audience, whereas you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm slowly getting there. And something like today, I actually had a little bit of writer's block when trying to start my new book. And, you know, I sat down, I started writing the introduction, and I just couldn't go somewhere I was okay with. And it was actually really interesting because the writer's block came the first time I sat down to write for someone that wasn't myself. So I was thinking about it, and I was really like wondering, well, how do I get rid of this writer's block? So I actually started to think about, well, what is this writer's block? And I realized that, at least to me, what writer's block is, or when it occurs, is it occurs when you're out of a flow state. And at least for me today, it was when I wasn't writing in my natural writing style, which is coming straight from the heart. It was something of more intellect where I was thinking about what I was writing rather than just writing. And the funny thing is, in order to cure my writer's block, I actually ended up writing about my writer's block and the things that were behind the writer's block.
That's fucking irony.
Right? And it was actually like one of the most beautiful things I've written. And what it made me realize is that, well, sometimes what you actually need to write isn't what you want to write. You know? And at least for me, since I'm just beginning my writing journey, I don't really think I have the freedom to choose what I can write yet. Because I still don't really understand my style. So I'm sort of developing that style. And the style isn't something that's static. For me, it's fluid, but it's more of not trying to force things.
Yes, I would say maybe you want to expound further on this point, but when you said you don't have the freedom to choose, I would think it's the opposite, right? Like, because you don't have and I think writing style is something which is very interesting because it's like a painting style. Like, just because you paint in one style doesn't mean you only have to paint in one style. So writing's a similar thing, but just because you don't have a set writing style, or maybe you don't know your writing when you're not very familiar with it yet, like, that doesn't mean that. I think that gives you more freedom almost, because like, you don't have it's almost like the idea of like coming to the desk or coming to the canvas without any preconceptions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're completely new. That's why a lot of people who make really good breakthroughs in like certain fields of science or art or whatever are those who come from outside the field because they don't have those preconceived notions.
Right. So the way I see that is pretty similar, although the way I see it is I'm not the one who does the choosing.
Yeah.
And I can't necessarily logically choose what to write about. It's something that chooses me. And like today, in trying to write my introduction, I had nothing to say because that wasn't what my mind was thinking about, and I wasn't in the flow when writing that. So what I realized is, and this might have to be how my process is going to be in writing this book, is I'm going to be jumping around a ton of places. And I might not write the introduction until the book's over. So kind of understanding that, well, now that's a great start because I realize that writing a book isn't continuous and I might start from the last chapter.
I think that's a really good point you bring up, which is like, it's all about setting expectations for your writing. Or maybe not setting expectations. I don't know. Maybe, I guess in a way, setting expectations for a lack of expectations is an expectation in itself.
It's setting intention.
Yeah. Where it's like, maybe I didn't communicate that properly. Where it's like, because you're entering this book and you know that, okay, this is going to be hard to write, right? It's going to be difficult, number one. I think a lot of people have writer's block as soon as they realize, like, oh shit, writing is hard.
Yeah.
Right? Because, like, because writing is organizing your thoughts and taking the mess that's in your mind and putting it on a page, right? So it's hard. It's hard. But first of all, you confront the fact, all right, this book is going to be hard. But also, second of all, you're like, it's going to jump and it's not going to flow linearly from page 1 to the end of the book. You're not going to wake up every single day and say your book is 200 pages. You're not going to be done with the book in 200 days because you rate one page every day. Like, that's not how this process works.
Right.
And because you're aware of that, because you know that, and I think because you accept that, you're accepting the process, which is like, that's so cliche to say, right? Like, just enjoy the process, bro. Like, just accept it. But, like, there's a reason why every cliche is cliche, because there's a kernel of truth. So your acceptance of that and realization of that allowed you to say, okay, instead of looking at this from writer's block, maybe it's taking a different perspective.
Yeah. And exactly. It's taking a different perspective, and the perspective I've now taken is I'm still going to try and write every day.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try and write around my everyday experiences.
Yeah. Oh my god. Hell yeah.
So, for example, and this is what I was talking about a few weeks ago, what I thought was writing every day would be having a set thing that I plan on writing, and then I just sit down and write it. But I realized with my writing, my best writing comes when I write to myself. And it's because it's kind of like I have these two voices in my head, which is one that is the present me, which needs advice, and then like my higher self, which is the one that gives the advice. And whenever I'm able to write from that higher self, my writing just flows, and it comes out of me because I'm listening to the advice I give myself. And what I found is that in giving myself advice, it's also advice that other people may need to hear.
Dude, I think the thing is with that is like, I 100% agree with you where like you're writing from your higher self almost, right? Where you're writing, giving your current self advice. And I think that really comes from clarifying what you value and clarifying the type of person you want to be, right? Because it's really easy for us to say like, I write from my higher self to, I don't want to say my lower self, but my present self.
Your ego.
Yeah. But the only reason you could see it in that perspective is because you value your higher self more than you value your current self, right? And you want to become like your higher self. But that only results from clarifying your values, clarifying the type of person you want to be. And I think when it comes to like writer's block, talking about, James Clear talks about this all the time, right? Don't aim for the outcome, aim for the identity, right? Where it's like, instead of saying, I want to lose 20 pounds, like, I want to be the type of person who goes to the gym every day. Translate that to writing. Instead of saying, I want to write a book this year, say, I want to be the type of person who shows up at my desk at 9 a.m. every single day to write.
Mm-hmm.
And not having this preconception that it has to be about a certain book, it has to be about a certain this, but rather, as you said, allowing yourself to write about whatever is on your mind, whatever is coming along.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly like what I did today, which is, I might sit down and write something great for my book. I might sit down and write something completely different that I end up posting on a blog post. And that's one thing that's really nice, which I'm building the foundations, and we've talked about this, which is I'm having different areas that I can post these different things and different sort of products for the different types of writing that I do, so that it's not just like a waste per se.
I actually was about to talk about this going into my own experience with writer's block, because I just had this thought when you were talking about yours, which I'm like, oh wait, my understanding of it requires more nuance, and this is the nuance, that the writer's block you feel is also contextual. And it's like, when you were talking about freedom, I really thought about that, where it's like, for example, maybe this is just because of the nature of how I've been the past couple of months, maybe it's because the system I have for organizing ideas, but I don't really have writer's block, and I haven't had it for a while. And I think, and I was thinking like, oh wow, this is cool, like I didn't think anything special of it, but then I realized, oh, it's because the context I'm writing in is very open and very free, and I can talk about anything. Because the types of topics I like to talk about are things like self-development, about Stoic philosophy or Buddhist philosophy, or the things I'm listening to on my podcasts or audiobooks, right? And I'm able to talk about it, and I always try to weave in some sort of story, some sort of personal aspect to it, right? So I'm like, that's a big, huge context I get to write from. I have a lot of freedom in that. And sometimes, yeah, that freedom could be a little bit daunting, but I look at it like, it doesn't require me to sit, to like pick up the pen it doesn't require me to put a lot of effort to picking up the pen or the paper, because I have so much to talk about, I have so much to write about, because it's just about me. But I realize, like, if I end up writing a novel, and someday I come up and I'm like, well, I don't know what this character, like, say I'm in the middle of like a fight scene, right? Like a big climactic dialogue scene, and I'm about to start my writing for the day, and I'm like, well, I don't know what the main character John is thinking today in this context. Like, I don't know. So I think writer's block is contextual, right? It's easy to say it's this or it's that, but it depends on the person, right? Someone like me who, yes, I'm writing for an audience, I have a little bit of social pressure to be consistent, but I'm also writing in such a large context where I could go in to tap into anything. However, I bet, J.D. Salinger talking or writing The Catcher in the Rye, which I'm reading right now, he didn't have that same freedom in terms of he didn't get the ability to choose what experience was happening or what character he was going to talk about or this or that, because it was like he was in the constraints of the novel.
Right.
Which is both good and bad, because the constraints of the novel, of the medium, give you a roadmap, right? So it's like, you don't need to show up every day and think about, oh, what am I going to write about? But at the same time, it limits you because you have to be in those constraints. So it's a give and take sort of thing.
Yeah. I guess one of the big problems with writer's block, and the reason why we haven't necessarily experienced it to the level of professional writers, is because professional writers also have a quality aspect and time aspect. Where if a writer is writing in this constraints of a novel, they can't just write down, stream of consciousness of whatever's in their minds, because they have to keep the identity of the novel, which is something that's above themselves.
Yes, but I also think, and this is just from my personal experience, I do believe that stream of consciousness writing is like a warm-up.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Where it's like, doing that for say 2 or 3 minutes just to get the gears grinding in your mind, right? Just to get that momentum. I think it's so important to do that.
Oh, 100%.
So it's like, let's maybe transition into maybe how to remedy writer's block, because we've been kind of dancing around that topic. I do believe that if you're experiencing a blockage, and this is my personal take on writer's block, I think a lot of writer's block is fear. It's fear of putting the words on the page. Because I think no matter what you're thinking, you have ideas in your mind of what to write. However, you are not saying you Jack, but like you, the listener, are judging those ideas before you even put them on the page. And you're saying, no, this isn't on topic, or no, this isn't what I'm writing about, or no, this isn't what I talk about, or no, right? You have these expectations. You have this idea of what I write. However, the way to get through to that is actually saying, wait, no. I need to just get shit on a page. Not having that fear about being judged of the writing, and instead just saying, whatever's in my brain, I'm just going to start going. And that's going to get your mind working. That's going to get it churning. And I almost believe, like, you have to get rid of the trash ideas in order to get the gold ones. And I bet you might get this in a lot of your, because you trade often, you invest often. And sometimes, and of course, I'm not very vested into the world of trading and investing, so keep that in mind. But I've heard some investors, maybe mainly VC funds, say this, that like you need to get through the 100 shitty investments, or maybe the 99 shitty investments, in order to get the one that truly breaks through. And yeah, that's sort of more in the VC world, not the like regular investing and trading world. But I do kind of believe that for writing, where you need to get through the 99 shitty ideas in order to get the one golden one.
100%. And I think one thing that's kind of cool is that in all of those really shitty ideas, there might be a single line or word that you could then use to transform your really good ideas. And sometimes you just have to write down the stuff that comes from the ego in order to transcend beyond the ego when the ego has nothing left.
Yeah.
It's like all of that doubt and the worry of judgment towards whatever it is that you write, that comes from a place of the ego. And in order to transcend that, you have to basically empty all of those thoughts. After it's emptied and you're kind of exhausted of that negative thinking, well, now you have this room for all the positive thoughts and the flow state to occur. At least that's what I think. But I'm going to go back to the example of like today of how I got rid of that writer's block, which was I wrote about the thing that was keeping me in a state of fear. And by writing about that fear, I produced this beautiful writing. At least I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But it started by a reflection about a dream I had last night, which the theme of the dream was imposter syndrome. So talk about writer's block. Imposter syndrome is a huge thing because it's the idea that because I don't have all of the evidence to say I am a writer, for me, even thinking about starting a book is so beyond me. It's something that, I feel like you have to have the identity of being a writer to say you can write a book. And I never really thought of myself as someone who could write. I was very analytical, not creative. And so doing this type of creative writing is causing me to transform that identity. And what I've realized is that's probably the reason why I haven't done as much writing, and it's that imposter syndrome. And so what I was telling myself of the way to get over it is just through it. Of just keep writing. And to write about the things that make me vulnerable to be able to receive, I guess, the flow state and receive the wisdom from whatever it is I have to say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like sinking into the feeling instead of running away from it.
And surrendering to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, instead of like getting angry at your writer's block or the inability of ideas to just flow. It's like sink into it, let it be. Say, don't try to fight it. It's sort of we were watching the Duncan Trussell video a few weeks ago, right, where it's like so many of us are running away from a monster that doesn't even exist. And once you just like stop running and turn around and realize that the monster that you're running away from never really was there, you're kind of good.
Yeah.
You're okay. There's nothing to be fearful about. Anyways, though, I think that's a pretty good place to wrap it up. To recap, writer's block fucking sucks. But the only way to get through it is through, right? And it's like you sort of gotta embrace the fact that it's happening. Don't try to fight it. Sink into it, and just let the writing flow, right? Wherever your heart, I almost think of it like sometimes our mind hampers us, right? So wherever your heart is telling you to write, that's what you need to write. And don't try to strangle your words, but let them flow freely. And it's hard, but once again, the only way through is through.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Beautiful. Maybe we'll talk about imposter syndrome next week. I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, that'd be really nice.
Because, like, we were talking about this before, identity lags reality.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Peace out. Much love. And do you have any last remarks?
No.
Sick. Stay motherfucking curious, y'all. Peace.